Welcome back to Young Tutor. Today we'll be taking up the topic squares and square roots. So what are squares? Squares are the number which is nothing but the product of the same number twice. In other or more simpler way, let's take an example of 6. So if we take an example of 6, we can write square in this format as we've learnt in powers and exponents in the past video. Now that we know how to write a square, how can we simplify it to actually solve it easier? We can simplify 6 square to write it as 6 times 6 or 6 into 6, which is equal to 36. Square numbers scale very quickly. That is, even if we square a two-digit number, it will turn into a 3-digit number. That is, 10 square is 100 because it's just 10 into 10, which is 100. This is how these are square numbers, and square numbers are quite quickly escalating numbers. That is, they get bigger very easily and very quickly. Now let's see some specialities of square numbers which we can use to identify some non-square numbers in between these square numbers. So to identify the number of non-square numbers in between two consecutive perfect squares, we consider a number a perfect square when that number square root is another natural or whole number, which will be coming to square roots later in the video. So let's now understand how can we do this, or what is the formula to find the number of square numbers or not square numbers in between two consecutive numbers. So let's take the two consecutive numbers to be 3 and 4. So first we have to take the first digit as n and the second digit as n plus 1. So this is equal, so 3, so n is equal to 3, which means that n plus 1 is equal to 4. This we should remember, as we can write this whole expression as n plus 1 whole square is minus n square. So this is the actual number or the difference between these two numbers, which shows and we have squared these numbers to figure out how many numbers are there in between. So this expression is equal to 2n plus 1. After simplifying the whole equation, we get 2n plus 1, which means this is the difference of both these number squares. And if we subtract 1 from the difference, that is, just remove this plus 1, we get the number of non-square numbers in this whole number. We should subtract 1 as the number of n plus 1 square is also included in this, which we do not want it to be included, so we just subtract 1 from it. Now let's see some special patterns that we can see when we square some numbers. So there's a very interesting pattern in that we can take 1 square, which is 1, 11 square, that is, by adding another 1 to this, we get 121. By adding another 1 to this, that is making it 111, we get 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So we can see how that by just adding another 1 to this number, or to 1, that is, by adding how many ever more ones we add, that the same number of, like, we count up till that and then we count back down. So we can see that 1 square or 1111 square is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is a unique result of a square number, and how by just adding 1 on one of the sides of this square number, by Adding a 1 to the square number, we get a very special pattern formed. Another pattern we get is that if we take the numbers, we can take we can just consecutively add a consecutive odd number to get a certain square number by taking 1 is equal to 1. 1 plus 3 is equal to 2 square, we know that, which is 4. We know that 1 plus 3 is equal to 4, and we know that 4 is 2 square. So we can also keep on repeatedly doing this. We can get 3 square, which is 9, by just doing this, and it goes on repeatedly. By just adding one number extra, we get the next square number, and it goes on scaling like that. This is another speciality or a pattern of square numbers. Now we can also use triangulation. We can use triangular numbers. That is the numbers which form a triangle every single time we add a column. That is, if we take 1, we are just making one block, which is a triangle practically, which is a square number. We know that as 0 plus 1 is 1, because we have to add consecutive ones, and as 0 is nothing, it adds up to 1. Next, if we take 3, we can form a triangle by using 3 blocks, as we can see, and by adding these two we get 4, which is another square number. And then the next triangular number known to all of us is 6, which is very simple to create by just adding 3 to the the triangle. We get this, and this is equal to the next number, square number, which is 9. Of course, you can go on forever like this by using triangular numbers and adding consecutive triangle numbers to get another square number. Now that we know some patterns on how squares can be formed, let's understand on how can we simplify or find an easier way to find a large number square. So let's take an example of the number 23. To find 23 square, it would be quite difficult, as 23 times 23 is a very big number to imagine, and we cannot immediately or quickly process it in our head. So we can simplify 23 as 20 plus 3 whole square. We know that because 20 and 3 add up, and by squaring it in a whole way, it's equal to both, and they both are balanced. That is, they don't have any differences between themselves. Their answer are the same. We can again simplify this as 20 plus 3 whole into 20 plus 3 whole. So you can see that it's simplifying all easier, and now we can apply the multiplication. We can apply a multiplicative formula, that is, to multiply both of these. We can write it as 20 into 20 plus 3 plus 3 into 20 plus 3. We might have to do more steps while solving this, but it will be a lot simpler in the end, as we are multiplying with smaller numbers than the bigger ones. So we can write this now as 20 times 20, which we know to be 400, plus 60 plus 60 plus 9. Now the addition of these will give you the answer of 23 square, which is 529. So now we can see that it's a lot simpler to solve in this method than using a larger or a more complicated method to solve this number. Now let's understand what are square roots. So square roots are the numbers which are the opposite of squares. So now if you remember, we were writing squares as 3 square. As an example, we are writing it as in this method or in this form. We can tell this as 9 because we know it. And now let's identify what is a square root. A square root is written in this format with a 2 over here to symbol as a symbol of that we are taking a root of squares. So if we put 9 here, it is understood that we are taking the square root of this number, or all we are doing is we are writing 3. You can see that 3 square is 9 and 9 square root is 3. All we are doing is inverse. If we are taking the inverse or the opposite of what we are doing with squares. Now let's start up with an example which we can understand, or where we can understand where can we use square roots. So we can use let's take the number 144, which is an area of a large square which we want to use for developing. So if we want to know what is the side of this area or this particular piece of land, so we can take the particular piece of land to be equal to a, and a variable. If a is equal to the side we need, so a equal to the side, then we can take a square is equal to 144. We know that a square is equal to 144 as the area is a square, and all we need to do is find one side or just the area, because this a square is equal to 144 and they both are the same. Now we can, if you remember that we've learned about how we can inverse the value of taking a square and making it into a square root. So we can write this as a equal to 144 square root. So the root of 144 or square root of 144 is 12, which we already know as it's just the 144. 12 square is equal to 144. It's very important to remember the squares from numbers 1 through 25. All the squares of these numbers, as these numbers appear more oftenly for your examinations or any particular use. They are very frequently used numbers in the environment. Now let's take the example of how we can use how negative numbers affect on squares, or how negative signs can affect squares, as that is very important. Let's take the number 9 square. We know that 9 square is equal to 81. And now let's take minus 9 whole square. So we are including the minus here, and when we include the minus, all we are doing is we are taking minus 9 into minus 9, which means it's taking and becoming the number 81 again, which means a root of 81 or square root of 81 is either 9 square or minus 9 whole square. It can be two options in this case, but usually you should always, normally we will take the positive option unless the requirement is needed to take a negative option. We can now let's take up another way of how we can write this. What if we put minus outside the bracket? That is, we write minus 9 whole square. That is, in this case, what we are doing is taking the minus and then putting 9 into 9, which means we are keeping the minus outside the brackets, and therefore we are not multiplying the minus twice, and which leads to the answer being minus 81. Which leads to the answer being minus 81. Now that we've understood how a minus sign can affect where a number where the number has to be ended, how the result can be influenced or changed by just a minus sign, we've learned this. So let's move on to the next topic. Now let's begin with the homework session. If you watched till here, thank you for watching. and hope you liked the video. Click on the like button if you did. Just before you go, let's take up with the homework. So for today's homework, I will give you a few numbers which you have to find the squares, and a few numbers which you have to find the square roots of. So first, let's start with the squares. So I want you to find the square of 8, that is 8 square. Second, I want you to find the number for 32 square, which I've taught on how to do this already, a simple way to do this. Then I want a third one that I would like you to find, and a very easy one will be 30 square. Will be 30 square. Then we'll take up with the square root side. So I want you to find the square root of 49. The square root of 1225. It's a huge number, but you can use a calculator if you need to. It'll be because it's a complicated number, and the square root is a quite bigger number. So try and find it on your own, but if you cannot, just request me in the comments below. I will tell you the answer. A third number that I want you to find the square root of will be 196. 196. All these numbers are quite easy to find, and they're not confusing. They're not complicated or hard to find. So go ahead, comment down below the answers of the homework. Thank you for watching, and also hit the subscribe button on your way out. See you next time. Thank you for watching. Now